Hello, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us. Nna ka lebitso ke Itumeleng, and I will be moderating this session where we'll be recentering the margins. I am pleased to see, that we are not alone in this conversation, and that there, are quite a few of us who are interested in learning and unlearning, the ways in which we can, create a safer and freer society for us all, right? So this year, the Soul City Institute continues to commemorate 16 days of activism through the Khalemelang campaign. Khalemelang from awareness to accountability aims to shift the needle from just being aware of GBV, but now to calling out social norms and attitudes that further marginalize victims and survivors on the basis of race, class, sexuality, nationality, or disability, right? So this year we said our feminism will be intersectional, nakanjani na, and the importance of applying this framework of intersectionality is, as I briefly mentioned, that survivors and victims of gender-based violence are people, and they are different people, as South Africa is also so diverse, in race, in culture, but also we also have people who are of lower class who often get, marginalized. We have people of certain sexualities and gender identities who often get, marginalized and excluded in conversations about gender-based violence. So this year, we'd really like to take a look at some of the groups that often get overlooked and therefore get left behind in all of our efforts to, end the social scourge of gender-based violence, right? So joining me today, I have Ukanyisa, as well as Daniel, as well as Uhepi. And in the interest of agency and autonomy, I am going to ask my guests to please introduce themselves and tell us a bit about themselves, how they would like to represent themselves, how they would like to be seen, and we'll take it from there. Kanisa, the floor is yours, and then we'll go to Happy and then Daniel.
Thank you, Itu, and good morning to everyone. My name is Kanyisa. My Kanyisa is name. My name is Kanyisa. My name is Kanyisa Mandla Kayise boy. My pronouns are she, her, hers. And I work in the space of sexual and reproductive justice. My focus is on sexual health and pleasure. And it is the understanding that the work that I do is, in fact, part of the greater work of intersectional feminism. And my stake in this conversation is the understanding that sexual health is not divorced from sexual activity, and therefore sex work is, in fact, work, and we need to decriminalize sex work.
Thank you. Over to you, Happy.
Okay, so hi, thanks to Itu. My name is Happiness, but they call me Happy. Surname is Gudra. I work for Soul City Institute organization as a social mobilizer. I work around in Kailicha in the Western Cape. I'm part of the LGBTQI community.
Gang, gang. Thank you, Happiness. Let's take it over to you, Daniel.
I am DSK. As you can see, I'm the founder of the DSK South Africa. I'm the founder of. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Hi, yeah. I'm the founder of the DSK Group South Africa, the gay fraternity of South Africa, and I'm a survivor. I'm a survivor for gender-based violence, and I work with victims in replacement, removal, skills development, rehabilitation, and employment for the whole of the North and the South Coast of KZN.
Okay, Daniel. Okay, so there's a bit of a delay from Daniel's side. I will be taking a moment just to make sure that I don't interrupt him while he's speaking. Please be patient with us with that. But thank you very much, Daniel, for introducing yourself, right? Now, last week we had a discussion where we were looking at, gender-based violence as it relates to people with disabilities, right? And today we will be looking at the lived experiences of the LGBTQAI plus community and people who are sex workers, as we, demand accountability for the government as well as broader society's failures to protect the rights of these marginalized groups. We know that regardless of the horrific incidents of corrective rape, for example, and the violence that people who are sex workers face, while at work, they still continue to be overlooked when it comes to their experiences of gender-based violence. And these are the clear indicators that an intersectional feminist framework is really needed. And one way that there's been a campaigning around that has been through the call to have sex work decriminalized, and I want us to start there because I feel like it trickles down so much to other points, because there are a lot of queer people as well who find themselves on the intersection of being queer and being sex workers because of being excluded from the economy and the workplace. So Kanyisa, I'm going to ask you to please explain to us, Sorana, why sex work decriminalization? Why are we decriminalizing and not legalizing? And most importantly, what is the role that the decriminalization of sex work can play in protecting people who are sex workers against gender-based violence?
Right. Thank you for that. So I think the biggest distinction with regards to legalizing versus decriminalizing is that legalizing also means that there's a set of laws and codes and regulations involved in the buying and selling of sex, right? So it takes the shape of capitalism. So you insert capitalism in the process or in the exchange of sex for other goods or for money. Whereas decriminalizing means that if I with my autonomy and my decision decide to sell you sex, then it's not a thing that's going to cause me to go to jail. It's not going to be a thing that if anyone benefits from the money that has been exchanged, they too are criminally liable. It also means that I can go to healthcare centers and access health services. If there's been a violation, I can go to the police and report that there's been a violation. Really, decriminalization speaks to the safety of sex workers and their families, and also their continuous need to access services outside of that. It also means that people who are sex workers can squarely say that this is the work that I do, and it's recognized work in the capitalist system. So it really just is about whether it's because I don't think people realize just like how the fact that sex work is criminalized plays into the criminal system itself. So femme bodies, women, girls get shipped around provinces in South Africa, and because sex work is illegal, they're not able to go and report that this is what's happening to me and this is not what I'm choosing for myself. When we think about human trafficking, the reason why human trafficking also thrives is because sex work is not legal. So people can be coerced and also forced into prostitution, because prostitution really is about the fact that there is no agency, as whereas sex work is about me choosing for myself that this is the work that I would like to do, whatever the consequences may be. So the difference is, once you've legalized it, then it's like there's a set of rules attached to it, which also take away from me how I'm earning the amount of money I'm earning. Whereas decriminalizing means that I can freely sell these services without having to expect the consequences that sex workers are experiencing at the moment.
Right. Thank you so much. It's clear, and I'm very happy that you explained it in a way that also puts it into a context that we can imagine, right? Especially when we talk about, you spoke about how this doesn't only affect people who are actually sex workers, but because of the way the bodies of feminine people are often also, perceived, right? That it affects all of us. That I could be walking down the street dressed a certain way, looking a certain way, and I'm assumed to be a sex worker, and that puts me in danger. So this is not an issue that only affects sex workers. It affects all of us, and it should all be our business, And speaking about an issue that affects all of us, I'm happy. I want you to please talk to me, especially, I want you to bring your experiences as someone who is queer and growing up in, peri-urban, areas. But what are the negative stereotypes about LGBTQIA people that you have, experienced, that you have witnessed, and how would you say they affect the broader community of queer people?
Okay, so I think for us as LGBTI community, we face a lot of negative stereotypes in our community where we live in. Like we get to be called names. We get to be harassed sometimes. They say that we want to be men. For example, lesbians, they said that they want to be men. And then they also like call us witches, that we have a snake somehow, which those are some of the negative things that happen to us. And then that all leads to being raped or being killed in the community. Like, for an example, I've got a friend that was stabbed to death just because she was a lesbian. She was harassed in a towel, enjoying herself, but she ended up being dead. So those are some of the negative things that we face in our community. And it affects all of us, not just only lesbian. It affects the whole LGBTI community.
All right. Thank you so much, Happy. And with that, I think you speak about such an important thing of we hear these statistics all the time about so many women were murdered, so many women were raped. But because we are not looking carefully into who these women are not a homogenous group. We are not talking about people who are the same. Some of those women are trans, some of those women are lesbian or bisexual. And what does it look like to be a trans woman and to be a lesbian woman, particularly in communities that are rampant, with violence? It further exposes them in a way that we could never imagine. So it's very important that we make sure that we look into the nuances of the people's different identities and how they are possibly exposed to violence. So thank you very much, Happy. I'm going to move to you, Daniel, and I think this question also feeds into something that Happy had touched on a bit. But when we talk about the LGBTQIA community in relation to, violence, right? Whether it's homophobia, whether it's, gender-based violence and domestic and intimate partner violence, what would you say are the unique challenges that the community face in relation to, violence?
You see Hi, good evening. I'm sorry, good day. Sorry for the poor reception. I'm on site. I'm using one of the survivors' homes to connect with you guys. So please forgive me on that one. I think for us on the ground, and we're talking about challenges on the ground when it comes to LGBTQ people, when we look at the challenges, there's so much of challenges that we face. One, they don't want to leave their partners. Two, because they're financially being supported by one individual, by the partner. Secondly, we've got family. They don't have no housing, so they have to stay there. The challenge is that they're going back into the same cycle of stuff. The same abuse, there's no housing. Like my comrade Happiness will tell you that there's no way in South Africa, and I'm talking about the whole country as a whole, where you'd see same-sex couples, even if they're married, get even low-cost housings. There's no low-cost housings. There's nothing for them. Adoption, we have a better rate of getting better. We have financially stable. We have good careers. We've advanced in society. But still, how many adoptions have you approved, Happiness? How many adoptions for same-sex couples can you say you have been a part of? I'm a part of the justice system. Exactly. And that's the challenges. So if you're looking at just inter-partner relationship and the domestic violence as just one part, all is linked to them, because there's nothing that we can say that's happening on the ground. In 2013, 2013, when it came to the national task team that was created for the national intervention strategy, I think, for the LGBTQI people. Tell me, Happiness, where have you seen the task team on the ground?
No way, actually.
This is 2022. It was created by government in 2013. We are supposed to have a rapid response team. We KZN, we only have 2, and that is by Cookie Edwards as well. And that's now, only after the National Strategic Plan that was implemented in 2018 because of the president. Now we have ours, the LGBTQI, from 2013. We have a national task team. Where's the rapid response team? Show me which province has a rapid response team according to the national task team. Nothing. And yet we were given this opportunity by president in 2013. We are now sitting at 2022. These are the challenges. I will take up an incident that's happened. And that is why I say the challenges on the ground is very difficult. We have a national strategic plan at the moment for gender-based violence, but on the ground it's not working.
Yeah.
It's not working on the ground. We have people, and I won't mention certain people, we have certain people who will come out and ask us, were you using too shorter shots? Were you too queer? Do you have your fingernails painted and that's why you're getting abused? Now, tell me, what are we creating? In our rapid response teams, and even for the national task team, for the rapid response team for gender-based violence, when it comes to the LGBTQ sector, we need to have sectors on the ground. We need to have teams on the ground. Even if we can't provide each province with one, but overall, nationally, under the national task team, we need one body. We need one rapid response team that can filter into communities and filter into provinces throughout South Africa.
Yeah.
And Happiness will tell you, when we go to LGBT victims, well, now we're survivors, but when we get to them, when they're injured and all of that, it's harder. They don't want to come out. They don't want to say it. The community has already shunned them. They have no education. They have no employment. They're stuck in that horrible scenario, that abusive environment. So where do we go from there? We are stuck in that space. Yeah. As much as we can offer them, we need a rapid response team. According to the National Strategic Plan, and we also need the National Intervention Strategy for the LGBTQ sector. We need them to be. The government is listening to this to our live right now. They must come to us and say, "Here's it. Here's Happiness. Here's DSK. Here's all the other LGBTQ people. Let's create one task team according to the National Strategic Plan and work from there as a rapid response team for the LGBTQ sector alone."
All right. Thank you so much, Daniel. I think you touched on very important points, about, particularly that speak to the need for this conversation, right? Is that while there are so many, policy implementations in the air and on papers that we can't even reach, we are supposed to be living fulfilling and quality and safe and free lives. But these are not translating onto our lived experiences, And I think this also speaks to social attitudes that we have as societies, is that even though the government can implement this policy and that policy, at the end of the day, it is also up to us to uphold them, right? And to use them as accountability structures for ourselves, And I think a lot of the time we miss the point that it's not just your opinion. It's not just your preference. Your opinions, your views, your preferences can be harmful and can have very detrimental effects on the lives of others. So making opinions about how people present themselves and how queer people do this and that. It's not just a matter of, just laughing with your friends. That can inform whether someone makes it home safely or not, and these are the things that we also need to hold ourselves accountable to as people. Yes, there's so much that the government can do, but we have seen that even with policy implementation, where it always falls short is on the ground where the people are, And so, yeah, I'd also like to please see you in the comments. Yambona Bomu in the comments. In the comments. We see you. Siponande, we see you. Pumsile, Leboni. Elaine, thank you very much for joining. Le Khudile Community Development Center, thank you so much for joining us. Please feel free to send through any questions. We will have a section where we welcome questions from everyone who is watching, and our panelists can answer them for you. And then we'll also look through the comments that are coming through, but I'm mostly interested to hear your questions that you have for our panelists, so that we can get as much as we can. We don't get these gatherings as often, and especially in such an honest manner. So let's make sure that we get as much as we can, so that we're also growing and we know how to progress the movement going forward. With that said, I'd like to come back to you, Khanyisa, and ask Corena, what are the common misconceptions about sex work?
So you spoke about it initially when you spoke about the fact that people who dress this particular way then are automatically assumed to be sex workers. So that's the first thing. Like, there's a certain look that sex workers have, right? And also misconceptions around where sex work actually happens. So, for example, a person just thinks that like sex workers only work in the street, so those that work in the street are the only ones, but also sex workers are in strip joints, right? Sex workers are on OnlyFans. Some sex workers are on private chat rooms in different places, whether it's on social media or off social media. And also there's people who actually have spaces, whether it's massage parlors or actual brothels, which are not going to be like bed and breakfast. So the places of operating are quite diverse, but we only really think of sex work as people who walk in the streets, right? And then like the look and feel of what a sex worker can look like sex worker can't be someone's mother. They have no rights. Like, under what circumstances would a sex worker choose to be someone's mom, right? A sex worker is obviously a drug user, and therefore, if they're a sex worker and they're a drug user, they don't deserve any kind of dignity or decency. And a sex worker who might be lesbian, who is sex work is trade. Obviously, you're not lesbian if you're a sex worker, because why would you have sex with a man if you're a lesbian person, right? And then also trans women specifically. It's like, oh, well, this is the only way you're ever going to actually get the attention of men and all of that. So there's like different ways where people stigmatize what sex work is meant to look like, what sex workers are meant to look and sound like, even the reasons why people go into sex work. And this is why I think we've constantly said that sex work is work, because people think, oh no, you need to pray about it, or no matter what your circumstances are, you should never have to resort to sex work. And it's like, the spectrum of what sex work is, the scope is so big that there's the limiting beliefs make people think that there's a level of desperation that comes, that gets people going into sex work. And I think there's a very big distinction we need to make when it comes to language, because there's people who have not chosen this for themselves, and that's a completely different conversation. But when a sex worker is doing their work, that is what they've chosen, and this is their job that they get paid for. And so what they look like, what they sound like, who they're responsible for, why they do the work that they do, is generally the big misconceptions around sex work.
Thank you so much for saying that, because this really ties in very well with just patriarchy, right? And that because a lot of our agendas, our personal agendas as people are rooted in patriarchy, that there are certain people that we see as less than, and that because also we want to police the bodies of women and queer people, that there's no way you can choose to have pleasurable sex on your own terms and make money from it, right? That you must be, there must be something wrong with you. You must be someone who's trying to spread HIV. You must be someone who's under heavy influence of drugs, And so I think it's also very important for us to start looking at people through the lens of dignity, right? So as you see someone, as you interact with them, afford them that dignity of having autonomy and agency over their bodies, right?
I think to cut you off, there's something that you mentioned which I think is really, really important. And we say it sometimes and it sounds like it's a joke. But actually, when it comes to sex, through time, there's been a trade. And it's whether you're accepting money or you're accepting gifts or you're accepting favors, or there's always there's always been some kind of trade. And it's always been fundamentally feminine bodies, queer bodies, who've had to understand that actually this trade can work for me and I can make this choice for myself. Absolutely. And what patriarchy says that it's wrong because you've chosen it for yourself. And the reason why people want to think about legalizing instead of decriminalizing is because they want to be punitive in the way that you choose this work. So I'm going to text you and I'm going to tell you where you can trade and I'm going to tell you all kinds of things. Whereas decriminalizing just says, I'm choosing this for myself. It's actually a very dignified way of making a living. I've known through time that people have been negotiating spaces with their autonomy sexually, and I know that works for me and I'm okay with that. Whereas capitalism goes, yay, if you want this thing, then legalize it so we can tax you for it.
Absolutely. So we're still, again, policing women and queer people, telling them what they can and cannot do with their bodies, which is fundamentally what the problem is. And that's why we get to a point where then people resort to violence. Because I cannot control you, because I cannot tell you what to do, then I'm going to rape you, I'm going to kill you, I'm going to abuse you, Happiness, I'm really, worried about the language that I've heard, especially amongst, Black people when referring to members of the LGBTQIA community. There's this clip that I saw on TikTok where I don't know what show it was, but the person on the show was trying to disclose to their parent that they're queer. And you can't say to your mom, Mama, you queer. Obviously, your mom is not going to know what that is, right? And I could see this person struggling to find words that their mom would be able to understand. You know what I mean? And often now, Tina is abantu abamnyama. Language wethu, the words that they have to describe or refer to people, abantu abafana nathi, this person had to be like, oh, sister Bettina, like, you know what I mean? That is quite harmful. But they ended up in that moment having to claim such a harmful, reference to themselves in order to get their mom to understand, who they are, So can you please talk to me around indaba ye-language? Yabo ukuthi singayilungisa kanjani language yethu ukuthi singasasebenzisa amagama afana nabo Stabana, nabo Sister Bettina, abo all those things that make life quite difficult, for people who are queer. How can we better our language around, referring to people who are queer, especially in African languages?
Okay, so it's so painful to walk on the street and you hear someone calling you nongaindota or boy girl. Those words are very harmful to a person. So for me, I think personally, people should use the inclusive language, which it acknowledge and respecting of the diversities of the bodies, gender, relationships. People like sometimes express their genders and sexuality in different ways. So it's very important that we use that inclusive language when speaking to us. And also, it's not for the video you saw, it's not easy to disclose to your family, because most of the time they don't understand. When you say I'm a lesbian, they don't even understand what is a lesbian. And then you sit down with them, you tell them, but still you find out sometimes, even within the families that we come from, you get judged and you get discriminated, and then you get some of the words that they use on the street, you also get it from the family. So I feel like it's important to use an exclusive language when speaking to the LGBTI community.
Thank you so much, Happiness. And I think that's really, really
Can,
true. I think,
can I add to that?
sure.
Okay, as much as we talking about talking in a specific language, we must also remember that schools. I'm you presently dealing with schools, and we're dealing with areas where English is a common language. English is a common language, and the worst thing, Happiness will tell you this. As much as they're going to say staban and they're going to do all of that, and they do that to us, but majority of the language or English that comes across is more hateful than the vernacular, because then we're getting words like cocksuckers, bend it like Beckham. We've got things. Oh, she wants to be a man. Come, we'll show her what a man is. We will rape her from the front and we'll rape her from the back, and then we'll make her a man. So as much as we're saying language as in Zulu and Xhosa and one of that, but English has more knife going piercing compared to translation, if you understand what I mean. Right, because here you're going straight to the jugular, and Happiness will tell you it's so hurtful when you're standing in the center of a big something important, and there comes somebody from the background. Hey, cocksucker, get off the stage. And you don't know what to do, because you've not asked for this, and you've coming across and because English, we have 11 languages in our country, right? English being commonly used right across the globe. So it's more devastating to have it done to you in English than anything in any other language.
Yeah, I hear you, Daniel, and I think as you're talking, this for me sounds like it would be so unacceptable for someone, for example, to call me the K word if I was trying to work, right? And there would be so much outrage to the point where I could get law enforcement involved, right? So when we're talking about policies, né, and we're talking about hate crime, and particularly as it relates to, the queer community, do you think we'll ever get to a point where I can go to the police and say, this person called me a cocksucker, this person calls me Istaban, and so forth and so forth? Do you think we can get to that point? Or even if, or also, do you think that there is a need for it, and that it would actually, do something to protect us against, hate crimes?
I'm going to say this again, and I'm also going to be disliked for saying this again. In 2015, we gave to the president and Happiness and everybody else, Soul City and everybody knows, a hate crime bill was given in 2015 to the president. It is sitting on his desk. The hate crime bill will ensure that nobody does this. The problem that we have is that as much as you can have a national strategic plan, you have all of that, we do not have a hate crime bill. If you look at America, you look at other countries that have transgender black women that are dying by the 13, sorry, you can hear me, hey, dying 13 victims per month in America. And the hate crime bill is working. So as much as we can go, I'm saying another 10 years, maybe 10 years, if we're looking at it, the will if the rate have it, like we just said, you can have it on paper. And here we have everything on paper. We have it all on paper. But we have to put it in practice in ground level. And we need the president to look at the hate crime bill. He's given us everything. He's given us the NTT. He's given us the the National Strategic Plan. He's given us everything that helps us fight gender-based violence. But when it comes to the LGBTQI sector, we need the hate crime bill. If you're taking at Kwamashu, Happiness, and the rest of the panel, we look at Kwamashu. Of recent,
3 months ago, you remember the incident where the lesbian was cut, her stomach was inside, taken out, her guts were taken out, she was stripped, her eyeballs were removed, her toes chopped. It became a public thing. Even the premier came to Kwamashu. But we've got every day that's happening. Just because that one incident has happened, like, where people made noise about it, every day we have 13, 14 victims that die. If you go back to the domestic, to the partners, first time, second time, third time, they're coming back in a casket. They're not coming back. So we need to have a hate crime bill so that we can like you said, accountability is so important.
Yeah.
And with a hate crime bill, it's going to teach people on the ground. It's going to teach the SAPS. It's going to teach the MPA. It's going to judge the JO, the DOJ. All of these departments will get to understand it. And if you don't have if you don't have an LGBTQI member in any of these stations, as in the police station or clinics or whatever, you're not going to understand. You're not going to feel. You're not going to understand. I know the feeling for happiness will know the feeling. Everybody will have the feeling because we are the ones that are survivors. We are now taken up and we're now fighting the struggle because we're the survivors. And if you do not have a survivor there, how can you understand? How can you to feel? And we're not saying feel sympathy, please. We're not saying feel sympathy. We're saying you got to show a bit of empathy. For the survivors, you have to show a bit of empathy. And there's a difference between sympathy and empathy. There's a big difference.
Thank you so much, Daniel. I think, you're touching on a very important point, particularly around including the very people that we are talking about, including sex workers in decision-making processes, including people who are queer in the very sectors and services that they seek, right? Because we know that it's not just at home and in the streets when we experience this violence. After getting abused, I still have to go and explain to a police officer how come my girlfriend hit me. I still have to go to the clinic and explain to a nurse why it is, that I want to abort, or you know what I mean? Like there's so many layers, and that unless you have lived experiences, you won't be able to fully comprehend what this person is going through. So the inclusion or the exclusion rather of queer people from the workforce and from the economy is also to our own detriment, because we don't get to be in the very same services that we seek, So thank you very much for that, Daniel. I see an interesting comment here from the Action for Social Justice International is saying actually that the Equality Court still covers certain elements of speech or derogatory names, and you can indeed open a case on that basis. And that's very interesting. Again, this is why I like this space, because it's a co-learning space. We are learning that there are some elements of accountability that do exist and that we could take advantage of. Again, also, should we have the access or the time or the capacity to do so, so thank you very much.
Can I just add something as well to my comment? Yeah.
Can you hear us?
Hello? Yes,
Okay.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. Sorry.
Can I just add something? Right. I have the latest stats here for KZN. I'm not talking about every other province. I'm just talking about the north and the south, right? We have 40% of sex workers. 40% of our victims are sex workers. So we are saying 40%, and out of that 40%, 38% is drag queens, is LGBT members in our sector. So you see how the numbers are there. The stats are here. And we're only talking about KZN. We're not talking about the other provinces.
Wow, that's really interesting. And I mean, speaking then of, accountability and what we need to get done, Kanyisa, I'm going to ask you to speak to us a bit about the recent developments in the fight to decriminalize sex work. And that was the announcement of a bill that could possibly lead, to the decriminalization of sex work. Can you please talk to us about the journey that it has been for us to even get to a point where our government might consider decriminalizing sex work, and that this might actually be a possibility? What is the kind of work and campaigning and pushback, and just how did we get here, and how can we make sure that the decriminalization of sex work does come to fruition?
So I'm going to start by saying, I'm going to precursor this by saying that there are people who are not me who have done so much work. There are people who have lost their lives doing this work. There are people who have abandoned or set aside sex work primarily because they felt like the advocacy to get to decriminalization is so crucial that they had to be almost single-minded in making choices around which platforms we can have these conversations and amplify the voices of sex workers. I mean, abosis do who from Sweats. I mean, I'm just mentioning with Sister because I've had numerous conversations with her, but there's so many other people, trans women, who've had these conversations, and it's been a journey around sensitizing not just the police force but police heads. It's been doing fundamentally gender-based violence work, because the understanding is that, like Daniel was saying, right, the people who get the worst of the brunt of gender-based violence are sex workers, because nobody thinks that they deserve the dignity. It's being part of the shutdown movement. It's being part of ensuring that there's a framework around gender-based violence and femicide, because sex workers are literally dying and being imprisoned for the work that they do. So it's been an ongoing process of just looking at different players, really just working the room and looking at who are the key role players and who do we need to speak with for them to understand that this decriminalizing sex work actually makes sure that the LGBTI community, people's parents who are sex workers, women, children are safe. Like, who do we need to speak with for them to understand? And so that has been one of the big ones. And then this particular one, I think I just want to reflect quickly on the bill right now and what the significance of the bill. You know, it's addressing the exclusion of sex workers in accessing labor rights. This is important because if you don't have, you can't even have UIF if you're a sex worker, because if you're a sex worker, actually you can't. I mean, remember COVID, in the thick of COVID, sex workers couldn't go and say, I'm self-employed, I'm not able to work right now, and get the benefit of those kind of labor rights or being a business owner rights during COVID. It is the insistent discrimination of the profession. And so this bill then says that sex workers are in fact business owners. Sex workers are in fact self-employed people. You know, sex workers are people who work in digitized spaces, and they shouldn't be discriminated on the basis of their work. And sex work in South Africa was criminalized in 1957, and fundamentally it was because of who does the sex work, right? And we all understand the laws that were put in place because capitalism is a white man who can't have autonomy. And so I think that when we think about this particular bill, and the reason why we need to get behind it is the marginalization, of course, of sex workers, the criminalization that makes sex work less safe. And I'm not just talking about people who take advantage of sex workers, but I'm talking about the police. I'm talking about the health fraternity. I'm talking about interpersonal violence in families, as well as violence within partners. And I'm also talking about access to funds, right? Something that I spoke about. Where if you're self-employed, if there is something that actually supports people who might be out of work for whatever reason, because whether they're ill or whatever, they get access to those public funds because they also pay taxes. And and also people can form groupings, right, where they can now come together. Like, there's Stockfelds, whether it's like small businesses, whether it's hairstylists. Now sex workers can also form unions for themselves to ensure that they are not only supported, but they have a community of people who understand their practice, and they can have spaces where they work and they work safely. And also, I mean, we think about the unemployment crisis, right? And the fact that sex work is negated as an option for work is is something that we really just need to fundamentally look at. And beyond that, and I think that it's a conversation that I really want to center in the conversation around gender-based violence, is the human trafficking. And I'm not talking about inter-country or intercontinental. I'm talking about interprovincial in South Africa, and the vulnerabilities involved because sex work is still criminalized. And this bill says that these are some of the things that we're considering, and these are the things that I've outlined now. And your involvement, your contributions to that bill, ensuring that it comes to pass, makes us safe. It lessens the burden of gender-based violence. It ensures that feminine bodies, queer bodies, children are safe in this country, because suddenly for criminals, it's not easy to just take a child and thrust them into sex work. So just I think that as a society, as a grouping in South Africa, the responsibility to contribute to this bill can come from whatever direction you'd like to choose, whether it's to ensure that children are safe, whether it's ensure that women are safe, whether it's ensure that people who benefit from sex workers don't automatically become criminals by virtue of benefiting from sex work, whether it's ensure that queer people can do the work that they want to do and benefit from it and be safe, whether it's to ensure that law enforcement can be held accountable for the violence that they superimpose on sex workers, and also that people who are sex workers can get and keep their condoms, because condoms get taken away by cops, that they can go and report and not get jailed because of the work that they do, that they don't get raped by police officers because they know that there's nothing they can do about it, right? So the responsibility that we've got as a society is to ensure safety of everyone. You don't have to like it. And if you don't like it, you don't have to do it. But fundamentally, we are each other's keepers, and we suppose once one aspect of society is violated, don't think that you're safe. Remember the occurrences of COVID. Someone was sitting outside their home drinking liquor in their yard and they got killed. So if you think that violating a sex worker is something far from you, one day someone's coming for you in your home to kill you as a police officer. So we have a responsibility not only of accountability, but to keep each other in safety by contributing to this bill.
100%. Thank you so much, Kanyisa. And please, it's very important.
Can I just add to
in the interest of time, Daniel, in the interest of time, I am going to ask you to, keep your remarks till maybe when we get to the closing remarks, and then you can just go ham, right? But yeah, I'm just going to be asking final questions, and then then you can make all of the comments, okay? So I was saying that when we were talking about how it affects all of us. It's not just about people who are sex workers that we don't think are human and we are better than and whatever. Is that once we create this culture of people being able to violate even one person amongst us, then none of us are safe, So Happy, I want you to talk to me about what freedom looks like for you as a queer person in South Africa, Elokshini. What's the life that you want for yourself? If freedom, that's when we say we are free to be ourselves. What does that look like for you?
Okay, so for me at the moment, I feel like there's no freedom for me. I feel like there's no safety for me, because it's so even hard to walk around the street, just walking during the day, not even at night. It's not safe for me. So I don't think at the moment I do have freedom. But I think maybe as time goes, we will get to that part where we will feel safe to be able to walk around the street, to be able to be who we want to be, the way we want to be. Because sometimes you find out some people have to hide who they are just to feel safe around our community. And then also when it comes to justice, like I hope justice in future they give justice to us as LGBTI communities, because there are many cases that we are attending in courts trying to get justice, but the system is just letting us down. And also when it comes to the police, they I don't know, they're not doing their job, because you get docket missings or some information on the docket are missing, or them not going to the people to get statement of what happened so that we could get justice for the crimes that have been committed. So for now, there's no freedom, but I hope someday we will have the freedom that we wish to have, like everyone else.
Thank you so much, Happy. And you're right. We deserve to be the people that we want to be, how we want to be them, So thank you so much for that, Happy. And then Daniel, I'm going to hand it over to you. You can make your remarks on what Kanyisa had made, and then also just talk to us about maybe how we can support, queer people in our personal lives, at work, at school, and just society as a whole. What can we all do?
Thank you. Sorry, I'm just I'm cutting. Comrade, I would like to also say that although we decriminalizing and we're going to support the bill for 2022, right? We must also pay heed to those sex workers that are in prison at the moment. The LGBTQ sector that's in there, they're not safe there. They're not safe in where they are. We need to change that. As much as we're supporting this bill, we must never forget the past and the people that are in there, especially the sex workers that are in there. And if you look at the role for the justice and the court cases that come across there, there's over 200 maybe now. Okay, the other thing is that when we're looking at schools, right, we're basically now asking for a third bathroom. We've got a male, we've got a female, we're now asking for a third bathroom. So when it comes to schools, we're saying, right, we need to have this, we need to sign a petition, get teachers involved, parents involved. Let us all sit down, discuss, hey, you know what, our transgender sect needs their own bathroom for their safety and for their freedom of space. And freedom of space is so important. It's my space. Right. And we're looking at starting organizations, and also the interaction between us, civil society, government, MPOs, NGOs, all of that needs to come together under one forum, like a stakeholders meeting at the end of every month to iron out issues. In the North Coast, we only have one victim for LGBTQIA for the last month, because we in your face. We giving it to you. We're sitting at the police stations. We're reporting. So coming as a public together is making it happen, and we're living proof of it in the ground. When it comes to work, we have to review our company policies. We must worry about pronouns. Pronouns are so important. If you don't know, ask. If you don't know, simple. Ma'am, what should I address you as? Simple. It is not. It's not writing a thesis. It's, you don't know, ask. And when it comes to employment, and why I only picked two because we're running out of time. Employment, we also must understand that if we do not speak out to our employees, the employees need to speak to the employers saying, this is what I am not comfortable with. This is what should be taken into consideration. And if you give in your input, you're going to get a perfect answer back. Perfect answer back. And they will change the policies to suit all the vulnerable societies. And not just LGBTQIA, sex workers, everyone. And we can get to that space.
All right. Thank you so much, Daniel. Okay, Kanyisa, I'm going to circle back to you because there is a question for you specifically in the comment section, and it's coming from Modi Orim at Kanyisa. There seems to be a sense of judgment for sex workers using digital platforms and exotic dancing scenes compared to sex workers who trade in the street scenes. Is there a level of classism in the space of sex work? And why so?
I mean, we still live in a capitalist system. We can't act like we're in a vacuum. And I guess even with advocacy, there will always be levels at where are we're advocating, and that's why intersectional feminism and intersectional advocacy is really, really critical. Because the person who trades from home and can have clients come in, have a bottle of whatever expensive whiskey, and then being ushered into feels like their sex work is better than someone who's going to be standing in a Hillbrow and soliciting. And I think that I am highly appreciative of sex workers who are highly visible in these platforms, because it's really highlighting the fact that sex work is work and people are trading, and they will trade where they will trade, and whether or not people choose not to decriminalize, the work will still continue. And so there is definitely a level of classism. I just can't remember the name of the series, but there's a series right now on one of these paid channels where these girls are talking about this body works for me. And everyone is like dying inside because it's like, wait a second. But what it's like, it's literally centering sex work and what it can look like when they speak about what their sets are going to look like, the kind of people they want to be part of this sex. It's like here in our faces and we can't escape it. And so whether or not, I mean, classism will exist. Because there's that thing, even it doesn't matter, even in our community as the LGBTI community, there's people who feel like they're the better gays or the better queers in the community. It does happen. That's something that obviously we're still going to work on. But fundamentally, what we want is to decriminalize sex work. So you can make a choice of where you want yours to happen, and whether or not you think that yours is better is neither here nor there. But just decriminalize it, that people can carry on working where they will work. And maybe people will also find better working spaces as well.
All right. Thank you so much, Kanyisa. And thank you to Happy as well and Daniel. Daniel's connection was a bit shaky, so we might have lost him there. But thank you all so much for joining us in this co-learning space, and thank you for all the comments that came through as well as the questions. We really do appreciate them. And just in closing, I would like to say that as we campaign to end GBV in our country, it's so important that we hold ourselves accountable for the ways that we might be perpetuating violence, right? So it's important to check your privilege, right? Okay, so you are a woman, right? And we know how women experience violence, right? But are you a queer woman? No. So in what ways are you perpetuating violence towards people who are queer? So you are queer, right? But maybe you are someone who is, of a higher class, So how are you perpetuating violence against people who are queer, but of a lower class, So it's important to do that continuous work of always checking your privilege in any space that you're in. And it will help guide you on how to just be a safe space. We talk so much about having safe spaces, but even as people, me walking as I am, I can be a safe space in the way that I treat others and in the way that I advocate for them in the spaces that I walk in, So we hope that this conversation has, indeed landed on open minds and re-emphasized the urgent need to recenter the margins by prioritizing the experiences and needs of the most vulnerable in our society. Women, children, and LGBTQIA people have a voice, and we need to stop silencing them and listen to understand how we can build a more inclusive society and dismantle the patriarchy that creates a barrier to accessing safety, health, and a good quality life for all. And in closing, I'm going to ask everyone to unmute their mic, and we're going to say, sex work is... it's work.
Exactly.
It's work, guys.
Thank you so much for joining us. Re kgalemela tlhekefetso ya bana, re kgalemela tlhekefetso ya batho ba bomme, re kgalemela le tlhekefetso ya batho ba e leng hore ba bona ba nyatsehile ka hara setjhaba sa bo rona. Kopa re hlokomelaneng kaofela, re bope setjhaba se leng hore re ka dula re bolokehile kaofela jwalo ka batho. Re batho kaofela, ha ona a sa tshwaneng le e mong, and we all deserve to be safe, we all deserve to be healthy and protected. Ke lebohile haholo to Soul City for borrowing us their platform, and I'm very happy that we were able to have this conversation and learn so much from each other. Thank you very much, and adios.
Peace out.
Bye.
Bye.